Doing my Woken people, this is your homie Woken Joe, and for this morning talk, I want to talk about how it was growing up in the city of Los Angeles as a Mexican American, or better known as Chicano, on Woken Joe tonight. How you guys doing? So I want to take this time to talk about how it was growing up as a Chicano in the mid 90s and early 2000s. Back in those times, it was real simple. At those times, the 80s had just blew off, where a lot of cokeheads were dying, a lot of people from doing coke and doing other drugs and gangs and stuff like that was calming down. We were hitting at a time where Bill Clinton was president, and things were just calming down, slowing down in the neighborhoods. It was all about partying, kicking it with family. But in LA, it was a little different. I came from the Compton side of Los Angeles, the South Central area. I lived in places like Paramount, Bellflower, Compton, Norwalk, Long Beach, Watts. So we were always around that area. And for the most part, there was mostly Chicanos, Mexican Americans. There was a lot of people that at that time, people from South Central weren't really going to like East LA, Montebello, because it was so overpacked with people from El Salvador and Cuba. It was just all these different kinds of Latinos, where it wasn't Chicanos anymore. Is all of a sudden it was just Latinos, Hispanics, and so a lot of the Chicanos end up being in South Central LA for the most of them, for the most part, and so that means on that side of town of LA, there weren't just Mexicans. There were blacks, Koreans, Asians, white people. Growing up around that time in the like 98, 99, the race wasn't as bad as people claim to be. It wasn't really bad at all. I was 10, 11 around that time. And it was okay back at that time to have black friends, but a lot of the things that were going on was a big no-no still. Like we had, of course, cousins that were females couldn't go out with black guys. We couldn't really hang out with black people like that. But I had a lot of friends that their families wouldn't even allow any black friends or different races. And with me and my family, we were very open-armed. So, we loved everybody. It didn't matter who it was. We had Samoans as friends, Koreans. My grandma used to love to go to black churches, and my dad would go to black churches. And so, we grew up in the hoods too. So, everybody knew us. And so, Mexican Americans, Chicanos at that time, we were pretty much getting along. I started noticing in 2001, after the whole 9/11 thing happened, I noticed when the time for us to unite, it was a bad time. I remember I was walking home from school one day, and I was living in Linwood. It's mostly a Chicano populated area. Home of Weird Al Yankovic, just to let you know. It was a time where all of a sudden blacks and browns just became enemies. For 12 and 13-year-olds were doing more of the damage than the older people were doing. It got to a point where we had Mexicans and blacks on one side of the schoolyard. I remember eating at lunch, and there'll be Mexicans on one side, whites on the other, blacks on the other, and mixed groups on the other side. And it was almost like juvenile hall where everything just became politics all of a sudden. Uh, a lot of people that lived that gang life, that had family from their grandparents to their aunts and uncles to their mom and dads, that's all they grew up, and so that they have that mentality of, like I said, some people, some families weren't even allowed to have black friends. I remember some of my friends weren't allowed to have black friends, and so racism was getting like before it was always the black and whites. Now it's the blacks against Mexicans, and before the only time of fighting that you would ever hear with black and brown was in prison. You wouldn't hear that shit out on the streets until like you would hear little stuff, but it was upon other people. It wasn't really gang related. It was mostly just one ignorant nigga and one ignorant fucking paisa, didn't have a fucking clue, you know what I mean? And so, times were different around that time, but it was still, everything you hear about on the news about drive-bys and gang fights, yeah, it was like that, but it was among each other. Growing up, I remember fighting mostly with Mexicans, and fighting with black people didn't happen until I was in middle school. But I remember in elementary school, in high school, it was always about fighting your own kind, and because, well, you got to remember too, most of our schools were populated with Mexicans, and so growing up as a Chicano, a lot of people that were from Mexico would come and fuck with us Mexican Americans. And I grew up learning the hard way that people from Mexico didn't accept Chicanos. They dislike Mexican Americans. They didn't like us. They believed that if you weren't from Mexico and you weren't born and raised from Mexico, you weren't a real Mexican. And so there was a lot of fighting among us and paisas for a long time. Like I said, I remember in elementary school, it was always me and paisas, me and different game bangers getting down, young ass motherfuckers, and then middle school, that's when it started becoming a race thing. I remember, at that time I was already living that life, game banging and selling drugs and doing me. I remember we were always fighting with black people, no matter what. It was in middle school, high school. I was more mature because the way I lived my life, I had to grow up faster than a lot of other people. So I thought it was stupid, but the same, because at that time I was backing up motherfuckers that were black. That if I felt they were in the right, like, hell yeah, dog, I got your back. You're my homie. Until one day I went to jail and I find out that's a big no-no. But even then, I've never had a problem with nobody. Like I said, the way I was raised, we love everybody and anybody, you know what I mean? So I thought it was weird that a lot of people were fighting their neighbors that they go to church with. You know what I mean? It just was weird to me. And so growing up, middle school was more of a black thing where we would always fighting. And I remember it was rockers against rappers. It was, almost like a greaser versus socias, where rich people versus the poor people. I remember, we used to always get down with the blacks, have riots in the school. I remember we used to play murder ball, which you would throw the ball if you catch it, and if you drop the ball, you have to run to the wall. But the catch is people are swinging on you until you touch the wall. And we used to always do that to the black guy, where the one that we wanted to jump, we would play murder ball and accidentally make him drop the ball so we can just have an excuse to jump his ass until he touched the wall. And that was our way of jumping people, and so like it was just on and on, back and forth, back and forth. So it was a crazy time, growing up as a Chicano. fighting against your neighbors, fighting against your own race, and it got to a point where you didn't want to trust nobody. You didn't want to have black friends. You didn't want to have Mexican friends. Hell, it got to a point where you didn't want to kill with your own family members. Back in those times, cousins were shooting cousins and stabbing each other, brothers killing each other. It was just war on our race and our culture. I remember teachers used to talk shit to us that were Mexicans, and they would get mad because they would talk to us in Spanish, and we would get mad because they're talking to us in Spanish, and it's like, well, why are you talking to us in Spanish? We're in America. Why don't you learn how to speak English? And they would get mad. Oh, you're Mexican. Why are you saying that? Because this is where I'm from. I'm from Compton. What the fuck? I'm not from Mexicali. I'm not from or whatever they're from. You know what I mean? No disrespect to none of them. My family's from Mexicali. My grandpa's from Mexicali, but I'm not from there. I'm from America. You know what I mean? What the fuck? And I used to always think every time when I would hear that, go back to Mexico. I'm like, I never been there. You know what I mean? That's like me. That like I used to hate it when there were race wars and people would say, oh, you fucking nigga, go back to Africa. They're not from Africa. They're from Watts. You know what I mean? They're from Oakland. They're from, they're from, whatever. They're not from fucking Africa. So why would you say that? And it used to piss me off when black people and white people and even Mexican people, some Mexican people and Chinese people, because I'm from LA, where there's a bunch of race everywhere. They would say, go back to Mexico. What the fuck? I ain't from Mexico, motherfucker. And, and it would get me mad. And so, yeah, it was like that. It was a lot of back and forth with that. Go back to Africa. Go back to Mexico. Go back to this. Go back to that. But, yeah, it was growing up in 2000s, a lot of things really calmed down where a lot of black people had our backs when the whole immigration happened in 2003. 2002, 2003, around there, 2014, 2004, 5, and 6, those years was bad, the whole immigration thing, and there was riots, and I remember going to Matharco Park, and with a few homies, and they were doing the protesting, and all these cops just came at us and threw tear gas at us, and it was all over the news. Like, I don't know if you guys ever remember that, but that was going on, and it was the first time in a long time that people, Chicanos that were from California, from here, and Mexican Americans or Mexicans that were from Mexico, it was the first time that we got along. It was like, hey, dude, I know you came to California, you came from Mexico, you came to my hood to have a better life, and I can respect that. You know what I mean? Where we never talk shit about you guys always talk down on us, but we're still having your guys' back, and it was a sense of respect from that side, and I thought that was great. You know what I mean? Where it was the first time that I was able to experience love and harmony through Chicanos from America and from Mexico, because like I said, a lot of people from Mexico do not like Mexican Americans. They don't like Chicanos out here, and not saying that all of them are like that. My grandpa was never like that, but he would tell me, yeah, there's some, people in Mexico, they don't like you, and I can understand why in a sense, but it doesn't mean that they know their history better than me. It doesn't mean nothing. It just so happens that I'm from California. I'm from Compton, and I would tell them, well, Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, Nebraska, and all the way to California was Mexico. And they said, well, yeah, well, it doesn't matter now because you guys are Americanized. And they, like I said, they explained their shit. And the ones that I would talk to, and I would tell them, well, you know what? It doesn't mean nothing. You're still, we're all connected in one way, you know what I mean? And we shouldn't be fighting with one another. And especially the whole immigration thing. That's when I really felt like our race was strong as a stronghold. Because you had people like Little Rob and uh, Mr. Criminal and MC Magic, putting the roots down for Chicano rap and Chicano music, and so if it wasn't for them too putting it down for us, and of course, Kid Frost, and you know just gain acknowledgement from the other side of music, and to Jenny Rivera and all that. So like it's all come to one, and respect, and over the years, the black and brown, we've always had a love and hate relationship. But because I have friends that were black where they were nothing like the ignorant ones, where they're all from the hood and they live the life that us Mexicans have, and they would agree with us. It's just the ignorant ones, or the kids that think they know everything. They don't have a damn clue, And so, growing up all in the 2000s until now, there's been a better understanding. I think anybody that was born from 1995 all the way down to the 80s, they will understand. If you're born in 1980 all the way to 1995, I think you have a better understanding of what I'm talking about, because there's some 21-year-olds that I talked to today that know exactly what I'm talking about, because when they were in the 2000s, they were 10 years old, where I was already in my 20s, so it's like it runs down to that, where they understand. But being a Chicano in LA wasn't as bad like my grandparents in the Zusu rice when they were Pachucos and Pachucas. It wasn't as bad like my dad's side of the family, where my dad's time, where it was all about the Mexican mafia and being a vato loco and all that stuff. In the late 80s, early 90s to the 2000s, it was mostly chill and trying to, it was just all those two generations of in the past, from the early 1800s all the way down to the 2000s. It was like it was time for that shit to put on hold, put on the brakes, and people finally getting along. And so that was my experience growing up as a Chicano. Like I said, there was a lot of fights among each other and with different races, but overall, it's nothing like how it is today. People are just ignorant now. But if you talk to any black person in the streets that are like in their 30s, maybe 25 and up, yeah, they'll tell you straight out, you know what, like the things is bullshit. It's bullshit now. I don't have no hate for you. You know what I mean? But all the younger people, they got the stick up their ass. They think they know what's up. They don't know what's up. You know what I mean? Because you know what? There's always going to be that one Mexican friend that's going to back your ass up. Just like I know that there's going to be that one black guy that's out on the street that's going to back you up. You know what I mean? And so, but as a Chicano, as one, fighting against one another, against each other, we need to stop that shit, man. Like, for reals, you guys need to open your eyes that, you know what? It's bad enough we have Chicanos that are whitewashed and blackwashed. Like, we need to come together and reunite, and realize that, you know what, we should be proud of what we are. Brown is beautiful. Even we don't know Spanish, that you need to respect us as our race and one as a whole and as a human being. You know what I mean? But anyways, I hope you guys like this video. I just thought I'd throw it out there. And thank you guys, and I hope you guys get ready for my next lesson. Thank you, and God bless you. And of course, and always, stay woke.